Welcome to the Meet the Masters webinar. This is the fourth in our series. Today, Monette Malewski, President and CEO of the Bacal Group in Montreal, is joining us. She'll be interviewed by Barry Pascal. The Bacal Group is a thriving family business, and it's in insurance, surprisingly. She's an award-winning strategic advisor and helps many families in the Montreal area. Monette may be in the insurance business, but she doesn't really sell insurance. She's in the business of protecting strong bottom lines and delivering sustainable long-term business solutions to her clients. Her tools are her depth of knowledge and her business acumen and her grace and elegance, of course. Today is Monette's birthday, and I'd like to ask you to join me in wishing her a very happy birthday.
Thank you.
Monette's known through her numerous accomplishments and awards, both within the philanthropic world and the business community. Her philanthropic world and business world seem to fluidly collide and continuously be intertwined. Her two worlds are intimately linked and constitute the undeniable foundation of her success. In 2019, Monette was honored with Women Who Make a Difference Award, which was remitted at the IWF World Leadership International Conference Gala. She's been chair of many things for Canadian Friends of Hebrew University. She's one of the founders of the Genius 100. She's very actively involved in the community, both in Montreal and a community of 100 exceptionally imaginative and impactful human beings. She's driven by strong values and empathy. Please join me in welcoming Barry Pascal, interviewing Monette Malewski.
Well, thank you so much, Lawrence. And Lawrence, before we begin with Monette, I just want to take a moment again to thank you on behalf of all of us, who has devoted so much of your career and your heart to giving back to all of us and giving us these great opportunities to learn. Now, I've known Monette for about 30 years, and yet I cannot believe how much about Monette I didn't know and how much we're going to learn together today. So first of all, Monette, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us, especially on your birthday. And because it's your birthday, we normally start at how you started in business. But I want to talk about how you started, where you come from, and your beginnings.
So my parents got married in Liège, Belgium in 1942, and my grandmother's home with the Gestapo at their door looking for the yellow stars. So that was the beginning of my parents basically together and marriage. And they realized in 1942 that all of the doors to all of the other countries were basically closed, and they really thought of one option. And 2 weeks later, they, along with my uncle, climbed the Alps, a lot like in the movies, the Sound of Music. They climbed the Alps, and they spent from 1942 to 1945 in a hard labor camp in Switzerland, in Lausanne. And the Germans did keep Switzerland open because of money laundering and because of the art that they stole that they hid there. So it was kept open, but it was definitely in the hands of the Germans. And so they spent their 3 years in very hard labor. When the war was over in May 45, they came back to Liège, and my father comes from a family of 10 brothers and sisters. He lost everybody except for one brother. And we had a cousin that was hidden by the Catholics during the war. He was 9 when the war started, when they left, and he was 12. So he came to live with us, and we spent, we had no place to live. So we ended up at somebody that my father knew's home. And he basically locked himself up in a room for 30 days and left my mother with her babies, with my cousin. And when he came out, he said the world was for living an optimistic and a full life, and that every day you had to live your maximum because you didn't know what tomorrow would be. And so his whole life and our whole life has been looking at optimism, not as the art, as an art of building a life and making sure that we're resilient. So a friend of mine told me this morning when she wished me happy birthday, you're one of the most resilient, courageous people I know. But that comes from my family and their appreciation of life and their thirst for life. So for me, life is all about moving forward. It's not about looking backwards. And Lauren said a lot about me, but I would say that at this stage of my life, when I look at my life, life is a dance between love and passion and fear, because we all have love and passion, we all have fear. But the leader of the dance has to be love and passion. That must reign. And so for me, everything I do in life is to move that part forward and not ignore the other part, but not spend a lot of energy there.
Well, Monette, knowing you, I would say that your ability to look to the light is in your DNA. And I can understand it, given your family's background and your experience growing up. But there's another thing that's in your DNA, and that's entrepreneurship. And I'd love you to share that, because I think for all of us, we've lived this experience with many of the families that we serve. But talk a bit about what your parents did when they came to Canada.
Yeah, so even before coming to Canada, there's a really good story of, I don't know if people know the Battle of the Bulge that was going on during World War II. And my father, coming from Belgium at the time, you couldn't own a business unless you were a citizen. And he had come from Poland when he was 16, and he wasn't a citizen of Belgium. And he decided that the baby in my mother's stomach, which was me, should be born in Belgium, so therefore he could own the business. So they basically got the Swiss to let them go. And in October 44, they climbed the Alps down to get back to Belgium, and the Battle of the Bulge was going on. So they had to go back. So when I look at entrepreneurship, here was a man who saw a vision, who saw where the future was going, knew the war was almost over, and was determined to end up owning a business. So the entrepreneurship comes naturally. And when they came to Canada, because again, the communist threat in 49, my father said, déjà vu, we want nothing to do with Europe. And we were going to the States, but the States is like it is today. Immigration was very hard to get into. So we fell into Canada, thank God, because I love Canada. And we fell into Quebec because we spoke French, we didn't speak English. And my parents started a business by themselves, the two of them. And then my brothers joined that business, and they had a dry cleaning business, but they worked hard together. So I watched all my life, my parents being entrepreneurs. And when I became one, I never really connected until afterwards, all the things that they had done that they taught me about entrepreneurship and about taking calculated risks and being able to do all of those things and the loyalty to each other. So that was very much a part of what I learned.
Well, there's a couple of important themes that come out of this. And it's one of the questions that I get asked constantly when I was involved with KLU, when I meet advisors from across the country, and they talk about working with family and they talk about succession. So let's talk about a few of those lessons, because I used to know a gentleman by the name of Michael Bacal. I met him when I came into the business in 1983. And he was not quite like any other insurance advisor I had ever met. He was extremely technical. He knew the Income Tax Act backwards and forwards. And I remember when we'd see each other at teaching opportunities, where we'd be at a seminar, at lunch, he'd go outside and he'd walk his dog. And he just worked differently. He
He
was
did.
not someone that sold. He was someone that listened, and he was someone that helped. And that's where his business seemed to come from. But when I
Well,
met Mike Bacal in 1983, what were you doing then?
so it's a great question. I was at the time, my background is I always wanted to be a teacher, and teaching was my love from when I was 5 or 6 years old. So I ended up teaching, and over the years, I ended up teaching in the Jewish day schools. And when I got into the Jewish day schools, because I was a teacher from the secular subject matters and not the cultural and Hebrew and Jewish matters, I got paid the same as the public system. And when I walked into the schools, all the teachers that had come from Europe who had lost all their papers, they were underpaid. So I principally turned around and built a union and got all the teachers unionized, got all the teachers going on the same scale as the rest of the public system, and they were always grateful for me for that. And even today, some of them are my clients, and some of my students are my clients. So obviously I did something right. But I moved over to the Association of Jewish Day Schools, which at the time was the one that represented all the Jewish Day Schools. So they saw that I was somebody who could deal with management. So I moved over there. And in 80, I moved over there in 81, and I gave up everything. I gave up my pension. I gave up my secure job, and I decided to take the risk. But then I met Mike, fell in love with Mike. And while I was with Mike, one of the things that I felt very strongly after a while watching him was not his industry, but I wanted to be my own boss. I had been always working with others and the head of, but I wasn't my own boss. And a very, very good friend of mine who was in the insurance world, a female friend, when I was looking as to what I wanted to do, this was 94, she said to me, well, why don't you go work with Mike? And I said, work with Mike? I don't know anything about the insurance industry. And they said, well, I asked Mike, and Mike said he didn't need me. He really worked very well, and he was doing his work extremely well. But he said, but if I wanted to come into the world, then he would going to introduce me to a lot of us who are on this and who know Joe Dickstein. He was introducing me to Joe, who was, of course, Mr. Insurance at the time, and he was a good friend of Mike's. And I met with Joe, and we were friends. Mike had been friends with him. We'd been to one of his weddings, so we were close. And Joe said to me, Monette, what do you want to do in life? So I said, there are three things that are important to me. And I think that the three things that are important, and I think that that holds everybody. I was just helping somebody with her CV, and I think it's really true. It's the skill sets we built. So the three things to me was, one, I can't have to stay a consummate professional that I am. If I'm not professional, then I'm not going to be happy. Two, I have to use my brain, because if I don't use my brain and I don't figure out things, and what I always say is I love to solve the problem. What's the problem? And I love looking to solve the problem, because to me, that's what our brains are really for. And the third thing is I have to be with people, because if you put me in a corner, I'll shrivel up and I'll never be the same. So those were the three elements for me that was the most important. And Joe says, welcome to the insurance world. You'd be a really good broker. So then he was great. He turned over to Mike and he said to Mike, so how's Monette going to work with you? Mike is what you said, Barry. Like, he's like, what are you talking about? How's Monette going to work with me? And he says, well, she's going to work for you beside you. No, Monette will never work for me. I hope one day that she'll surpass me so that I could do my fishing and I could do my bridge and I could do my this. And basically, who knew that 4 years later, Mike was going to pass away? So PPI is the group that took me under. Joe took me under. They're the ones who taught me. He brought me to my first meeting at Kananaskis when I was like green and I didn't know anything about the tax that they were talking about, but he knew I had the skills to be able to translate. And I think the most important thing is we take our skill sets with us. Content is learnable. It's what skill sets do we have as people? What's the trust, the authenticity, what we do? So he pushed me towards what I call strategic generosity. He pushed me in that field, Joe, because he said, that's your background. That's something that you could make a marriage of. And Lawrence said it so well. They're entwined together with me. And so that's what I did. And I remember my first big client that I had, that I brought in all the materials, I got all the finances, I got everything. And I said to Mike, this is going to be great. I'm going to make so much money. And Mike stopped me dead in my tracks. And he said, remember who you are, Monette. You will never be happy unless you have both the social vocation and the business vocation. So you have to make sure that you always have a balance between the two. And he was very wise, because he was absolutely right when he said that. But 4 years later, he passed away. And here I was having a thriving business, but I didn't know his clients, because basically I was setting out to build my own base. He didn't need me for his base. So I said, oh, that's going to be easy. I'm going to go into the office. I'm going to go look at the files. Well, Barry, you were right. He was an accountant and he had everything in his head. His files were razor thin. Today, you can't get away with it. But in 94, you certainly could. So they were razor thin and they had nothing in it. And all of a sudden, I started getting letters from insurance companies taking away some of my clients because they didn't know that Bacal was still going to exist, that I was there. So PPI, thank God for them. It was Andre and Joe and everybody in PPI that really worked hard with me and said, Monette, go to the insurance companies, get a list of your clients from them, because they have to give you a list for your clients. And that's how I recreated my clients, was basically going to the insurance company, getting a list of who my clients were, and figuring out how was I going to write them, how was I going to speak to them. I thought I could speak to everybody the first month, and I realized that doesn't happen. So I basically spent a weekend really writing a great letter about Mike and how great he was and how much he had taught me. And I would really passed the flame to me. And now I was there to be able to help them. And I kept 96% of my clients. So I figured that was a good job. And I told them that I would meet with them at the anniversary date of their policies. But if they wanted to meet with me before, they could. So a lot of them did come up with the letter in front of them, by the way, showing me that somebody who could write this letter, we want to do business with her. So again, it's about that trust and that ability to build relationships.
Well, let's just pause there for a moment, because it's interesting the way you handled that. If that letter had been about you and how terrific you were, maybe not the same effect.
Absolutely.
But you're so genuine and you have such a generous spirit that your letter was really about Mike, and it was a tribute to Mike and all he had built, and this torch that was being passed to you, and this precious responsibility that you had, because we've talked about this, the respect that you have for each family that you work with and each business that you're involved with. And you borrowed from your experience as a teacher, where you have this
Absolutely.
ability to look around and say, we can make this better. Let's make this better.
Absolutely. No, my teaching skills, I remember one day, Barry, going back and giving a session to the teachers. Were having I think they were having a meeting, and they asked me to come and teach them about budgets. And I remember walking in, and I remember telling, oh, teachers sometimes don't like their jobs. So they said, you're so lucky you left. And I said, this isn't luck. I said, this is risk taking. I says, and I decided to take that risk, but all my teacher skills will stay with me. Because at the end of the day, I think we're all teachers. I think at the end of the day, whoever's in front of us, we're teaching. Because as Joe would say, you're building knowledge and giving knowledge. You're really making people understand. And a great story with Mike, going back to what you said, is when I went to see one of his clients, he said to me, I have no idea what I bought, but I trusted Mike so much. And he told me it was the good thing, so I bought it. Can you please explain it to me? And there I was as a teacher explaining what he bought. And at the end of the day, it was exactly what he needed. But our way of dealing with the client was very different.
So I guess you had to institute best practices into your business and administration, because you couldn't replicate Mike's ability to remember everything.
No, so there I was lucky too. Mike, I tell a lot of people and we deal a lot with morbidity and mortality in our field. And you can't always, but I was very lucky. I was with a person who lived his death. So he was lucid till the day he died. And I had him home in palliative care for 3 months. So we had a lot of good discussions, and he was very much there and present. But one of the things he did is, I have a daughter. He was a second marriage. So I have a daughter who at the time was 27, Leanne. And she was living with us, and she was helping me take care of Mike, and loved him very much. And he loved her very much. And one day he said to her, you're not sure where you want to go, what your next step is in your career. And maybe you want to spend a little bit of time helping your mom, because she's going to need all the help she can have. And if you would walk in and help her, spend a year there, help her, let her get on her feet. And then if you want something else, you've got lots of time to go and figure out a new career. Well, it's 25 years later, and Leanne's here, and Leanne's my succession. She sits on the board, actually, of Family Enterprise Canada. She's a board member. She's very active there, and they all love her, and she's great. And I just have a pleasure working with her.
Well, Leanne is really a bright light in the industry, and I've had the pleasure of working with her at Family Enterprise as well. And she has your commitment and your passion, not for insurance, but for people.
Yeah, people. She's a people person. She loves people, and you see that right away in her. And I also, because she stayed with me, I was expanding our business a little bit, and I have a brother, a younger brother, that I brought in about over 15 years ago, and he does our group insurance basically. So we have turned this company into a family business. So when I join FEC, we're lucky. We're FEAs. Leanne and I are both family enterprise advisors. I did that, and that was Jim Burton in 2015 who phoned me, and he had started that program. And he phoned me as one of the first ones in Montreal, besides other people from PPI, and said, I would think you would be great in taking this course because you have the French, you have the English, you'd come. But his real operation, and not that he didn't want me, is Justin Gagnon was our tax expert. And he knew that Justin wouldn't go to the course without somebody like me. So I said to Jim, and you're not paying for me, eh? He goes, no, no. But I will send Jocelyn with you. And so Jocelyn and I took the first course. We were the first ones in Montreal from BPI to take the course, and we never looked back. Leanne took it a few years later. So we're both FEAs. And
Well,
so when
I'll
we're
share
FEC, we're lucky because we have a family business. We can go to the family business side of it, and then we can go to the FEA side of it. So we have that that ability to cross over from the two.
Well, Monette, I'll share a secret with you, says it's just us friends here on this
Right.
call. When Jim called me, I was doing a community job that year, but then I said, I will do it the first year I can, but I have a condition as well. I want to do it the year that Andre Couture is doing it.
Oh, I love it. And you did it with Andre, I know.
I did, absolutely. And I knew that if I was on Andre's team, that I would succeed. And that's exactly what happened. And what a great experience.
And us two was just then. She knew she'd beat the English, but I knew what kind of a studier Justin was. And so it was lots of fun.
Let's just borrow from that for a moment, because that informs another important point. It's something that I observed in my father, Bill Bell, and it's something that I observe in you and in Leanne. And that is, yes, you have to know how insurance works. You have to be an expert. But the passion is often about the people. And I see that that's the difference between good and great. The great advisors are passionate about the people that they help. So talk to me a bit about that and how you're able to take the technical, but put that on the second page, and take the family agenda and the business agenda and put that on the first.
So when I look at my whole career, and I've had many careers, insurance is at the end of my career. I was a teacher, I was in the union, I was in a community. I've been in a lot of nonprofit presidents and so on and so forth. I looked at what's the trend, like what's the theme, you know, going, and all of it is the recognition of my love of people and my passion of people. And I think that if you have that theme, that you really recognize that your trend is loving people and relationships, because, you know, everybody talks today about the artificial intelligence, about this, about that, replacing us. And I turn around and I say, we're going to use it as tools to help us, but they'll never replace the relation and the emotional component that we bring to the table. So the technology could be replaced most probably, and we'll learn it. And I'm learning to use ChatGPT, and it's working. I find that I'm not even using it as well as I can, because we're learning a lot of things, but it's never going to replace that element of who we are. And our business is a business where we deal with mortality, morbidity, we deal with people's legacies, we deal with subject matters that people are often uncomfortable talking about. And so it's to put them in a comfort zone. And as a teacher, I always went to the level of where my students were and not where I was. And I think when we work with family businesses, we have to go to the level of where their comfort zone is and where they are, and bring them forward, and not what we see, but what they perceive. And like I said before, it's that love of solving the problem. So getting people to see their problems or their issues. And I also think it's not only about helping build financial legacies, but I think we help people build capital legacies, spiritual legacies, social legacies. All of that is part of what we do to help people move forward. So letting people know what their purpose is and what their values are goes along with what we do. I don't get paid to do that necessarily, but I think that that's part of getting those relationships with our clients.
Well, it's an interesting thing, Monette. If I think of the times that you and I see each other, and we seem to bump into each other pretty regularly, sometimes they're at business meetings, but most times it's at community meetings.
Absolutely.
And even early on, when you were new to the industry, when I'm sure there were challenges and I'm sure you had to deal with cash flow and you had to deal with business and pipeline, you were always engaged in community. It was always a priority. Can you talk about that and the ability to balance those two and pause your business activity in part of your day and turn around and focus on community needs?
So I'm one of those lucky people that don't need a lot of sleep, number one. So that helps because I go to bed around 11:30, 12, and I wake up around 6. And I don't like to be lazy. So I have lots of time on my hand and I want to use my time properly. And so for me, I really need to, what I would call in the Jewish world, it's called tikkulam, repairing the world. And I really think that part of, we can't repair everything, but we can begin to repair the world. So I think our insurance world, working with families, and my other world that I work with is related because it is about repairing the world. So for me, it's doing the same thing in a different manner. The technical parts are different. I'm also a very big process person. So any organization I go into, good governance is a very important piece of what I do. About a year ago, I read a survey done in England of 500 entrepreneurs who give over $1 million each to community. And they looked at what are they good at when they work in community, because they're all obviously successful in their business. And there were two things that happened. One was it showed that they loved the domain. So they got involved, not because it was McGill or it was because of an institution, but they either liked the cancer or they loved precision medicine. It was the domain they loved and brought their friend. But the other group loved good process, good governance. And so I recognized myself in there. I says, because I don't have those millions of dollars. I do well, but, and so for me, it was good governance is important in no matter what we do, whether it's in our business or with the families that we work with, and also not in community. So I'm known in the community. I just took an organization that I was the chair of for the last 6 years, and I moved them from 17 people to 11 people. I cut our budget by 40%, but I moved our bottom line from 9 million to 25 million a year.
Oh my.
And that's good governance. That's working together with people and working with partners and empowering others and not just yourself. And I think in my business, I do that too. I empower other people. And I think in the businesses we work with, we have to let people feel that they're empowered as well.
And Monette, does philanthropy play a role in the planning that you do with your clients?
Yes, always. I always look at what I call, people like to say the word plan giving, but I put that away and I look at strategic generosity. So as part of estate planning, what is your strategic generosity? And people like to think of them being generous. So you open up the discussion. They might not understand. People are philanthropists. I don't care how much money you give. Philanthropy means humanity, and helping humanity. But they look at the word philanthropist as if you have to be really rich, which I don't believe. So I look at strategic generosity. What's the generosity you would like to do? And we move from there. So I always talk about it. Absolutely.
Monette, I think in your practice, you're really about the relationship and the important conversations that you have with people. Can you talk to us a bit about how you begin those conversations?
Those are not easy, but I think that you begin them by just asking how people are, how they're doing, how their family's doing, how their business is doing, where they see themselves in the next 5 years or in the next 3 years. How do they see, are they going to still be in their business? Are they looking to sell their business? Are they looking to stay there forever? I think that's part of the conversation, is to get them to talk about themselves and where they see themselves in the 5 or 10 years coming, because then you move it to them and not to you. And then when you talk about themselves, so then how do you see the rest going? Where do you have any family that you would like to bring in? What's happening with your family? I mean, I have one client who never thought, it's interesting, he got into the business because his father was in the business, and then he bought the business from his father, and then he never thought that his son would come in the business, and his son wanted to do something else, but he was helping his son. So I tried to show him that his son isn't in his family business, but it's the business is an entrepreneurial family. And the difference between a business family and an entrepreneurial family, and they were definitely an entrepreneurial family. He was giving 10% of the money to help his son start another business, but he was giving the administration and the HR. So he was heavily engaged in what I call an entrepreneurial family. So you just got to give them the language sometimes because they don't even understand it themselves. So they're doing it, but they might not have the language. So you move it. He's never coming into my business. I says, no, but he's an entrepreneur and you're an entrepreneur and you're an entrepreneurial family. Your father was, he is, you are, it's going to go on, and so that's the discussion, I think, is to get people to open their minds to other language and to see a wider set of rules.
It's a really interesting observation because sometimes we speak to these incredible founders in their businesses, and then they see their offspring, their kids, doing other things, other businesses. And in some ways, they sometimes consider it to be a failing. And it takes someone like you to turn that around and make them realize that, in fact, that's a tribute to their success. Those are the values that they've instilled in them. Now, I understand your ability to have that conversation today. But if you were speaking to Monette 25 years ago, tell me what the difference is in the conversations you were having then versus the conversations you've had today.
So I'll tell you a really good learning lesson, okay, from the conversations. I ended up being very lucky, and I ended up being on the board of the Chamber of Commerce of Montreal when I started in my business. And that was because of other things I did in my nonprofit world, by the way. That's how I got there. And I had an opportunity to finally, for business, meet one of the head guys, top guy, that I won't say who, but really, and I was so nervous. I came in stupidly with all my papers and started, and he's looking at me, he says, "This is what you want from me?" And it was basically a bye-bye meeting. And I went, Joe taught me that we don't do this. But at the beginning, you're so nervous because you're not quite sure in front of a person like that. If you have the act, and I sat on a board with him and had no problem. But in the business meeting, I was so naive about wanting to get the business that I did it the wrong way. And that was one of the biggest learning lessons I could ever have. I just put everything and made sure it stayed in the suitcase, basically, and said, I've always had a great conversation with him. Why couldn't I have a great conversation with him about what we usually do? So I turned around and I really tried very hard to say, it's about the conversation, Monette, and you are somebody. So over time, I learned to do that. But the reason I went back and I got my FEA is I wanted the language. I wanted the tools and I wanted the language that I thought was coming out over the last 20 years. There's a tremendous amount of language that's come out. And I felt I'm never going to be the strategic person that does all of the work. I'm going to hire people, but I know what I'm doing. And I know that the language is much more important. And I got that language intuitively, but now I have it much more from a point of view of what I see out there and look. But it was an intuitive piece. I've always been able to. When I was president of a union and I was negotiating with schools, for me, it was always a win-win situation. It was never a win-loss. So anything I ever did in life was to make sure that the other person felt really important and got something. And I think it was just a natural piece of who I was. And over time, it became a bigger skill.
I think that when you meet a lifetime learner, they're the ones who don't stop at, well, I have an intuitive sense of how this works. I've been doing it for many years. They take that next step and say,
Exactly.
I want to learn the vocabulary. I want to understand these tools because I know I've been doing this unconsciously, but you wanted to be able to point to the actual components of what it was you were implementing in your process.
100%. And it is lifelong learning. I think we all are lifelong learners because we have to be. And it's that authenticity and that ability to trust you is to be that you're able to know. And also, I believe my nonprofit world allows me to have great conversations. I have quite a few clients who are accountants, and they say to me, we'll do the accounting on Zoom. Let's have lunch. And the reason we're having lunch is because we're having great conversations. And I think that it's not always about just business. It's about understanding who you are, who they are, and therefore that builds the relationship you need for the referrals, for everything else that you have.
I think you and I were both fortunate enough to share Joe Dickstein as a mentor.
Absolutely.
And I think Joe used to talk about the importance of being curious, of being interested, more interested in the person you're meeting than in the material that you're holding in your briefcase.
No question, because one of the things that we didn't talk about is in 2003, we all lost a very, very good other broker, Max Schreier. And he was basically a colleague of Mike's, same age, same everything. And when Max died, it's Joe who phoned me, as well as Max's accountant, who I knew very well. And they both asked if I would be interested in taking over Max's business. Now, Mike died in 98, and this was 2003. And I had just recreated a new business with Leanne, getting going and so on and so forth. So the last thing on my head was to go buy somebody else's business. And yet Joe came after me, and he basically said, the family is looking to make sure that the clients, Max's clients, are well taken care of, and really have somebody who have their interest at heart. They weren't interested as much in the money as they were in making sure that the legacy was passed on and that the clients would be well served. And so Andre, again, you know Andre, because you went to school with her and we work with her. So Andre and I started looking at what are we doing here? And it was very interesting. So we took over the business. And what I did is I said, I will do 3 months of due diligence. I promise I'm not taking over the business, but if you need any broker to deal with any insurance issues that we're having, I'll deal with them. But I want 3 months to do my due diligence, to go meet some of the clients, see who they are. And basically it ended up being the conversation. It wasn't what I was doing from the insurance side. And that side, I'll tell you a really good story, but it was on that side. And then they asked me, Max had 18 hockey tickets. Are you buying the hockey tickets? Are you taking over his hockey tickets? So I have 2 of because his son kept 2. So we have a third of a season. But it was that, again, that ability to go in and build that relationship, that because he was an incredible man. And like you said before, Mike passing the torch to me, I talked about Max. Now you're going to find something very hard that both Andre and Max had sold a lot of PPI's cost recovery policies in the 90s, which were great policies. And he used 8 or 9% returns when people were using 15 or 16% returns. So they were really good. But we were now in 2003 where the market had really gone down. And these were YRTs, and they weren't earning 8 or 9, they were earning 4. And therefore they were all in trouble. And when you went into Max's files, Max had already put into the file, moving them out of there and putting them into the ICFs. He had already, all his files had that. Well, could you imagine as a broker walking in to saying to the client, whatever Max did for you is no good, please buy this? There was no way. So I had to spend the year showing them that what Max had sold them was really good. It was in trouble right now, but it was really, really good. And he was a great broker. And they were mad at me. They were mad at Max. They were mad at me, angry with me. But by the end of the year, I kept 96% of the clients as well. So, but it was a much longer period of time because you had to go in and understand where the client was at. And I have one great story. There was a woman, about 84 years old, a Max client. And I had to go and show her also that her policy was not doing so well. And I walked in, and she apparently, when she was 55, didn't even know how to write a check. But eventually her husband died and she'd taken over the business. It was an international company. She brought in her grandson in the accountant's office, and she says to me, "You, I do not want to like." I never met the woman before. I'm going, whoa, okay. And then being a teacher, I understood why she bought the grandson, because she never understood what she bought. And therefore I had to do an explaining from day A. So I did. I explained the whole policy, and the policy had problems. It was about a $2 million policy. And so finally she was really angry, and she'd been playing the market in the policy on top of it all. So it was really in big trouble. And I finally looked at the grandson and I said, "Look, your grandmother is 84 years old. She lived beyond the life expectancy of what the insurance company thought. Therefore, that's already going against her. She played the market. The rates aren't there. But tell me, would you rather have 1.5 guaranteed now as a liberated policy, a paid up policy, or the 2 million? Or would you rather have your grandmother die within the next 2 years, have your 2 million, her live a long time and have your 1.5? Right? So she looks at me and we became very good friends. I would have tea at her house every couple of months. So again, it's a matter of understanding where your client is and where they're going and what you have to do to move it forward. And then, of course, I had her company, I had her family, I had her nephew who was in there, but it was a matter of taking, I think, the time that you need and not rushing it and making sure that you are where they're at and they're not where you're at. Very, very important.
So you're coming from an interesting place in that respect and honor is at the core of what you do.
Absolutely.
So when you introduced yourself to Mike's clients, it was all about honoring Mike. When you introduced yourself to Max's clients, you might have taken a more aggressive tone and said, you see all this insurance that you have, it needs to be replaced. But instead, you took that time to, first of all, understand Max's practice, because after all, Max was an industry icon. In
Absolutely.
the community, in the industry, none more respected than Max.
Absolutely.
Those who don't know Max, Max used to have 3 different briefcases for 3 different types of clients, and he had an investment business with RSP clients, where if you had to make an appointment with Max during the RSP season, he took appointments right up until midnight. And he would be driving around and meeting with clients really almost 20 hours a day. He was just fearless in his desire to take care of
No
clients.
question. And I didn't buy the investment part because I don't do that. So that was given elsewhere. But absolutely, you're right. So imagine going to his clients and they revered him and loved him. So there's no way I could go and say here. And I remember Joe saying to me, I thought we would sell a lot more insurance in the first year or two. I says, well, forget it. We got to get the client to stay with us and like us, and that's basically what happened.
And understand what they did, and understand that what Max did was so appropriate for the times that he was working in.
Absolutely.
And the world had changed, right? And you needed to react to those changes.
Exactly. And I learned a lot about the insurance world by doing that. Boy, did I learn about those products because I had no choice to understand them. And we really showed them how great they were up until then, and then now we have to figure out something else. But it was fun. It was hard, but that's not we expected, but it is what it ended up being.
And so tell me a bit about what's changed in the industry since you started and what you're seeing today.
So I think that people as consumers want to have a good experience, no matter what, whether it's with us or with the insurance company. And I think insurance companies today are not giving people good experiences, unfortunately. So we're playing a much bigger role of that intermediary between the insurance companies and the people. And we got to play that role smart because people are getting frustrated quite often, whether it's claims, whether it's underwriting. It's a very different world than it used to be. And therefore, we have to spend a lot more time massaging that I didn't have to do before. And I think that the insurance companies have lost a lot of people. They have a penalty of like a dearth of not enough employees. And the good ones, like if you take the underwriting, we're very lucky at PPI to have these great underwriters we work with. But it's very hard in the insurance companies because they don't understand. They still don't have what we used to have. So there's a lot of, and they don't want to talk to you, basically. They want you to leave them messages. So it's a matter of how a lot more work has been done on that side than we used to do, as far as I'm concerned. And so it takes much longer for a policy to go through as well. So you have to have a lot more wide time. So when people want to come into the industry, it's not like the investment industry where they're going to make their fees. We know that they have to have run like a business. You have to have enough money to run because it takes a while for that insurance to be put in, which wasn't before. in the years that I've been there, it's very, very different from that point of view. I
So
know
what
that
do you
people,
mean by money to run? Explain that.
meaning you have to have a bank account that has the backup, because you're not, you're putting in, I just had a case where it started in December of 22 and I placed it in December 23. A big case. I mean, that's a year.
Right.
And so therefore you've got to have basically a
Balance
bank
sheet.
account and a balance sheet that allows you, and young people coming in don't necessarily have that. So that's where we have to figure out how to do that. And we also are doing a lot more servicing than we ever did. We always did servicing, but we expected the insurance company to come back with a lot of it. And today they're not. So you're basically in a world where you get paid up front, but you're servicing a lot. And if you're doing it well, I service all my clients all the time. I do reviews, I do everything. So there's a lot of energy put there that wasn't put there before. I see that as a difference. I don't think that the insurance companies are innovative enough, not using what they have from IA and so on to help us, basically. So when you do an underwriting, for instance, if you know a postal code, you certainly know how healthy the person is and what kind of lifestyle they're living. I mean, there are things that you can go get that can help us that are not quite there today. And I think that that's a big piece. When it comes to clients, I think they're much more knowledgeable because they have the internet and they could read a lot, but it gets very messy because they need to have you now decipher what they know. Rather than teaching them, you now have to take apart what they know and kindly put it into the proper perspective of what to look at, because they're curious, they know, they want like a good experience. And that's what I think we have to give today. Everyone's
Oh, I
looking for
have
a
no
good
doubt that
experience.
you do.
Yeah,
You're all about plain language and real feelings.
yeah. So that's to me, I don't know about you. Do you feel the same as I do about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But let's now transfer your client experience to your family business experience, because so many advisors are thinking about succession. So talk to me about building a family business, introducing best practices, and using plain language and best practices with family members as you build your business.
So because we're not a big company, it's easier to do. I have Leanne, as I said, went back and got her FEA. So she's really, really in the same league and even higher league than I am, most probably on that one, because she's now sitting on the FEC and she knows it. And so the family practice, the key that I have is I want Leanne to meet all my clients. So Leanne knows my clients. So there's a point in the business where often the clients want to see you and they don't want to see the next generation. So I will start seeing the clients, but then I'll bring Leanne in. And then they get to meet Leanne, and often they don't even phone me, they phone her and they do the work with her. So it's a matter of that soft introduction. And there are others. There's, for instance, an investment broker that I've worked with for years and years and years. And he now is starting to work with the next gen of the families that we worked with. So he's not even coming to me for the next gen. He's going straight to Leanne because he knows her capabilities. He knows how good she is. So he doesn't even phone me. He phones her because they're the children of, and they're the same age, and they're going to need what she needs. So she's starting off being able to do that. So I think it's a matter of also making sure that they have the same language as you do. They have the same commitment, and Leanne does. The culture. I think you have to build a culture in an organization where the culture is about empowering it and giving the power to others. And that's what we do. We tend to do that. My brother Philip is very, very, very strong on the group side, but he also has the family skills. He's got the same skills as we do. He's a schmoozer. He's a talker. He knows how to talk to the people. He knows how to, when they get angry, he knows how to deal with it. And so again, it's about what's the language we use? What is it that we want to give our clients besides making money? How do we treat them? And they stay with us. The first client that PPI ever had in group insurance in 97, it was in December when they bought what's his name, McLeod's
Like
business,
Gary McLeod's
Gary
business.
McLeod's
Okay.
business. I put in the first group insurance because it had been a client of mine who'd been running after me to put in group insurance. And I said, unless I have good consultants behind me, I'm not interested in doing it because I'm not peddling. I'm a consultant. And they still are client. They're still our client from 97. So it's a matter of being able to put in that relationship no matter what. And Leanne, technology wise, she knows it all. And Philip knows his technology too, but we've got good people. I always say that we have a virtual company behind us. You know, PPI is a virtual company that can help me with anything I want. So I call upon them all the time to work with me. And so does Leanne, and so does Philip, work now with AGA, but it doesn't matter. We've built relationships within the people we work with and within our partners that they respect us. The insurance company respects us too, because we don't clamor and yell at them when we know that they're right. We only go after them when we know they're wrong. And therefore that respect is there. And Leanne's learned it and Philip's learned it as well. So I think that original piece that my parents translated to us goes down. It goes down to my grandsons as well. I see it. So it's a matter of making sure that you use the same values and purpose, because that's what it's all about. What's your purpose in life and what are the values that you can give? When we leave here, that's all we have at the end of the day.
Well, there's no question that you've built an environment where you have three strong professionals in the insurance world. But if we look at your firm, the firm is greater than the sum of its parts. You've created a
Absolutely.
real culture and a real presence in business and in the community. So now let me ask you, as people come into the industry today, which is a very different industry than you walked into all those years ago,
Absolutely.
what would be your advice to them? Where should they start? And what should they look forward to in terms of how this industry is evolving?
I think they should start by meeting people that can help them. I really do. They can't do this all alone. I think they have to go get, like you and I had, we had this incredible mentor. I think they have to go find people, and there's a lot of people out there helping them and moving them forward. I think they have to find their voice. I think they have to find who they are within the industry and their voice and how they do it. And they have to have patience. If they don't have patience, they shouldn't be in this industry, because this is an industry where you really have to have that patience with the client, because the client, when you phone them, you think they're going to phone you back, and they're selling their business, or they're doing a merger, or they're not there for you when you think they should be there for you. You have to have that patience of, it's not because they don't like you, it's because they're busy. And you have to have that patience with the insurance. So if you don't have patience or learn to have patience, you shouldn't be in this industry. So I think that that's something that people have to learn. Authenticity, as we talked about before, people know if you're authentic or not. They know what you're doing, and you have to have that assurance that you're not going in there to show them. I don't show anybody ever spreadsheets and illustrations, and that's not what we do. And so therefore, how do you sell something as a teacher? How would you teach somebody? Because I think at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're giving knowledge so people can make wise decisions. And I think that that's what brokers have to learn. How do we transmit knowledge? Or how do we take the knowledge they have and transmit it into simple language so that they could, because people don't want complexity, you know? And also, I think they have to learn to work well with the advisors. You cannot be that I'm the advisor and therefore nobody else counts, which we know industries that do that. But you have to end up being somebody that says that the client is in the middle and we're the advisors. And therefore, I always tell my clients, you have to have a lot of lenses around the table. Don't have only one lens. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket, but have many of us around the table to advise you. Therefore, you have many lenses to be able to see what's going on, and the outcome will be best for you. Client-centric is what I would teach them to be.
Well, we're going to open it up to questions and to Lawrence in about 2 minutes, but I want to ask you one more question, and I think I know the answer. How long do you think a new advisor should wait before they start giving back and getting involved in community?
Immediately. You don't wait, you do both. I think you learn to balance your life to do both, you know. My daughter Leanne used to say to me, well, you know, I don't know how you do it both, but she gives. She was the vice president of the hockey association in Verdun, in Vaudreuil, I meant. She does, I mean, she was doing it without realizing she was doing it. So it's not that she had to do what I'm doing, but she had to go find her own space, and she was. She was like taking it over, and so I think you've got to do both. I think if you want to, that is a piece of who I am, a social vocation, and giving back to society is such an important part, because we are blessed to be able to move into the world the way we are. When we look at the world today, the global world is in chaos. There's no question. And how do we bring some humanity and some civility to it? It's by what we can do. You know, I used to teach Leanne, there's a circle of influence where we know how to deal with some we can't control, but we control our reaction to. And I think the best thing we can do is how do we react to, and we have to give of ourselves if we want this society to be a better place in the world. There's no
Well,
question.
that's a beautiful note to close on, Monette. What I'd like to say is that you've really made that your life's work. And when you speak about strategic generosity, I think your whole practice, and in fact, your life's work, has been that of strategic generosity. I
Thank you
want to
so
thank
much.
you so much for sharing your unbelievable story, learning about your incredible family and this beautiful practice that you've built. But most of all, the impact that you're having, your ability to make change and leave things better than the way you found them. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Barry. Thank you for being such a great interviewer as well. Love you.
Love
And
you.
thank you, Lauren.
I had who to talk to, Monette.
Thank you both. That was fantastic. I have to tell you, Monette is a great example of the adage, if you have something important to do, give it to the busiest person you know, because they'll do it. And I've known Monette for, I guess, since pretty much almost since she came into the business. And indomitable spirit is something that you'll see in all of the masters, and it's exemplified by Monette. And thank you, Barry, for bringing it out and showing Monette in her very best light. Although
Thank you.
without you, Monette would have also been in her best light.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. This was the fourth in the, I think, hopefully evergreen Meet the Masters of Insurance webinar series. Every day, people suggest new masters for us to interview. The interviewers will be busy now through the end of September. Next week, Charlie Peelsticker will be joining us.
It's great.
And I'll be interviewing Charlie. And then I get some weeks off, so that's wonderful. We'll be here every Thursday at 11 a.m. We're recording all of these sessions for posterity. Once we have a few in the can, and we've gone through the transcripts and made sure that they're accurate so that we can index and you can look up who says what, when. And we have them watermarked so they can't be monetized. They're going to be free. We'll post them and you can watch them again. And others coming into the business can watch them. If you know of people who we should be speaking with, please let us know. The interviewers are Barry Pascal, Paul Bourbonniere, Julian Wise, Susan Saint-Amand, Dave Patriarch, Ted Pulsey, and Jim Ruda. If you know other interviewers who might want to participate in this, again, it's going to be evergreen. And the reason for that is there will always be new masters of insurance who come to the fore. There will always be people who do things differently and extremely well. And one thing about every master of insurance who I've ever met, they do it their own way. They bring their own personality, their own abilities, their own history to dealing with people and trying to make people's lives better as much as they can every day. And they come to work every day with that as their sole intention. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again next week, Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, same bat channel. Thank you.